Alrighty, good evening, everyone, and welcome on our fifth and final series of our PA. We're going to get started in just a second. We will show you a short video, and then we will get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's session. We are Pre-Med CC, a student-led organization established in the fall of 2021. Our goal as an organization was to create an online community for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities with the hope of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians.
And while we advertise our organization as being for community college students, our events are open to anyone. We realize that finding guidance and mentorship in a pre-med journey can be especially challenging for first-generation pre-med students, people that lack the financial resources, or just those that do not know people in the medical field.
One of the best parts about our events is that they're virtual, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home. We typically have events on Fridays from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. PST, and on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. PST.
If you aren't able to attend the event, all our sessions are uploaded on our YouTube channel. Many of our sessions will end with Q&A with our speakers. Any questions that you have can be put in the Q&A section on Zoom, and our team members will read them and have them answered.
After you have attended our event, you can log on to our website and complete the quiz, which will contain questions pertaining to our session today.
If you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you'll be awarded a 2-hour mentorship certificate to show that you attended our session today.
If you want to stay connected with our upcoming events or want to tell your pre-med friends about Pre-Med CC, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Pre-Med CC.
Alrighty, well, thank you. We're blessed today to have a distinguished panel of experts and people that have gone through this journey, and they're going to go and introduce themselves, and we'll start with either Mario. Do you want to take over, and then
we can kind of take the lead. Everyone, welcome to our final session. Thank you for joining us. And this is officially the 5th installment of our pre-med hosted sessions, where we're focusing on providing some pre-PA content that's hopefully useful and kind of the content that we wish we had when we were applying. And today is super exciting because we have some fantastic, talented panelists with us here. And before we dive into them, I'll just briefly introduce myself and Omar. My name is Mario Navarro. On Instagram and social media, I'm the Mexican PA. Attended UC Davis and currently looking for my first job as a PA. And then Omar, he is el.pa.drino, El Padrino on social media. And he is in his final year at Stanford University in California. And with that, we will take it off. And so we'll start with the first question. And this will be for every panelist. I'll name you guys in order, but we want to know your name, where you're located, did you happen to go to a community college, and what's your current specialty, years in practice, and then finally, one word of advice that you tell your younger pre-PA self. And then just to let you guys know, that question is actually, we put that in a direct message to you guys. So we will kick it off with Flora, if it's okay with you. We'll start with you.
Sounds good. Well, thank you first of all, Mario and Omar, for having me. It's always a pleasure to be part of these events. So my name is Flora Rodriguez. I am a PAC working in the Central Valley. I live in Fresno, but I work in a small farm working community named Kettler, if any of you guys are familiar with the Central Valley. So it's a very small farm working community. I am doing family medicine, and I have been a PA for a little over a year and a half now. And then one word of advice I would tell myself is to listen to your inner voice. I felt like during my journey, I was so focused on what everybody else was like, you should do this, you should do that. And I never took the time to decide what I wanted. And I felt like that kind of influenced a little bit of my journey before I was pre-PA. So always listen to what your heart is saying. I know it sounds pretty cliche, but listen to what you want and things will fall together.
Sweet. Thank you, Flora, for those words of wisdom. And again, thank you for joining us. All right, Rene Padillo.
All right, so my name is Rene Badillo. I currently live in Austin, Texas, but I'm from the Rio Grande Valley, which is the southern border of Texas and Mexico. My current specialty, I work in primary care with an emphasis on men's health. I'm a new grad, so I've been doing this for about a month now. And one word of advice, I think I'd agree with Flora, kind of the same thing, just kind of trust in yourself, believe in yourself. I never felt fully, confident as a pre-PA, even in PA school, still having that imposter syndrome. And even now, kind of as a new grad, it's kind of scary being on your own for the first time and seeing patients on your own, but it's just kind of have more belief in myself, have more trust in yourself. You're doing the right things and things will fall into play.
Love it. Thank you. And the fact that you're here with us means you're alive and have survived your first month of practice. So
oh yeah, I got through the new grad scary. So up from here.
Oh my gosh. All right. Thank you, Rene. Next up, Sonia Torres, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's having a good Sunday evening. Thank you both for having me. My name is Sonia. I am a recent grad. I started working as a PA back in March. So this is my first year in family medicine, which I'm really loving. I transferred to SJSU from San Jose City College, and then I completed my master's in physician assistant studies at UCD. So that's been a long ride. One word of advice I would have for everyone would be to be gentle on yourself. I think for many of us, we have really high expectations of ourselves, and sometimes we forget that, we're humans. We can only take it one step at a time. So definitely being gentle on yourself on this long and sometimes stressful road.
I agree 100%.
Love it.
Right.
Yeah, everything. I agree with everything each and every one of you guys have mentioned. I haven't really got the chance to meet any of you guys other than Rene. We've been in contact on Instagram for several months now. So nice to meet y'all. And Sonia, we might be parientes. My mother's maiden name is Torres. So maybe if we go far back enough, we're cousins, just like most of us.
Probably are.
Yeah, we probably are, right? That being said, I mean, I can, unless you have another question, Mario, I can just ask a question that anyone can answer.
Oh, we are very blessed, and we still have two more PAs to introduce. We have Mr. Josh Gutierrez. If you're here with us.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I'm on the road right now, but kind of had to hop on my phone. But yeah, my name is Josh Gutierrez. I'm a emergency medicine PA. I just barely graduated in August, so I've been practicing for about maybe a little over 2 months now. I got the credentialing pretty fast, so I was thankful and blessed to at least start pretty soon. I went to a community college in New Mexico, junior college, and then I transferred to university. I went to Texas Tech University for my undergrad in biochemistry, and then went to get my master's of physician assistant studies at Texas Tech as well. So one word I'd probably say to PAs or people that are in the application process is, not to be too hard on yourself and not make or break any certain situations. Do your research on what kind of programs you're wanting to apply, because different programs have different things that they harp on. Some may look more towards your grades and your GPA. Others look for more patient care experience. Some look for extracurriculars. So really just doing your research can go a long way in helping you get that interview and get into the program. And honestly, just getting started and getting through the process, you're going to feel like maybe you don't belong there, but just remember that, you're there for a reason, and, you're going to do great things. So.
Sweet. Thank you, Josh, for joining us. And then let me see if Rigo Ramos has logged in yet. I know he had also messaged me that he was going to be a little late. If he hasn't, I will do his introduction. So Rigo Ramos is a practicing PA currently working in family medicine and urgent cares in Southern California. He's a community college transfer from Compton College to Cal State Dominguez Hills, where he earned his BA in Human Services in 2014. He went on to attend Cal State Monterey Bay for their PA program and was actually president of their inaugural cohort. And he also has served as preceptor to students from Charles Drew University and USC, and that's University of Southern California. He continues to mentor pre-PAs and is the pre-PA branch leader at the Pathways program at USC. And he strongly believes in outreach and wants to diversify the field of medicine to be representative of the population. And so at some point today, he'll be joining us. I know he's running a little late. But yeah, introduced him as well. And so we have 5 fantastic panelists and then myself and Omar as well to answer all of your guys' questions, and we'll kind of take it away. I know Omar, you and we're a little anxious to ask that first question, so I'll let you take the lead.
Yeah. So just a general question for any of y'all. Like, what is the favorite thing or your favorite thing as a practicing PA since you've started?
I can go first. So I would say my favorite thing is just connecting on a deeper level with my patients. My patients come in, a lot of them are like uninsured farm working patients, so they're already scared of going into clinic. And so once I go in there and I'm like, hola, me llamo Flora, soy la proveedora, les voy a ayudar, and they're like, look at me like, oh my God, like, were you born in Mexico? I'm like, no, soy de aquí, like, and it's like just that connection for them. It just, you could tell their comfort level just changes. And so for me, just seeing that the patients, like, are able to trust me just by the simple fact that I know Spanish has been such a blessing. And I know in the long run, my patients have really gained a lot from having a Spanish speaking provider. Not only that, but just connecting with them culturally has been very beneficial, because patients, I know there's other providers there that do know Spanish enough to kind of, get them by. But patients are like, it's different with you because I feel like you know me at a different level. And so I feel like that's been my favorite part.
I love that response. I've already seen that, just as an EMT and like as a rotating PA student. So I know it's might be an even deeper level of like happiness and appreciation when you're like have that C to your name and the patients know it. So I love to hear that.
I guess I would say just watching my own confidence kind of grow in seeing patients. I know during PA school, during clinical year, I never really felt like, confident enough to go into the room and talk to the patient and get the history, get the workup, do everything, and then presenting to the attending. Like, everything was kind of scary when you're still as a PA student because you're scared, oh, am I going to miss things? Or I didn't get mad and XYZ. And so just being a new grad PA, kind of going from clinical year to the new grad session, it was scary at first, going into the room. And it's kind of funny because it's like, I've been doing this for the past year as a PA student, but just the first time going in as a PAC, making the medical decisions, it was scary for the first couple of years. But then, once you start getting more comfortable, it's like, okay, tomorrow I'll probably see 25 to 30 patients on my own. And I feel pretty confident that I can walk in, walk out that room and know exactly what to do for each patient. So it's been pretty fun to watch, myself grow as a provider.
That's good to hear, because I'm still like interviewing for jobs, and so I'm gonna go through that phase probably in the next few months. And yeah, it is something kind of scary to think about, but like you said, we gotta trust our training and the fact that we've made it to this point. And again, like the whole road is a road of growth. So at every point in time, if you're feeling out of your element, that's okay. That means you're in a position where you're probably growing. Sonia, did you want to take a stab at this question?
Yeah, one of my favorite things is actually empowering patients through patient education. I love seeing their face light up when I explain to them how high blood pressure can damage their kidneys. I normally draw my, my second grader drawing of a kidney with a giant arteries. And I explain it to them, you can see it in their face, how they're like, oh, that's how it causes, that's how it's hurting my kidneys. So I love just teaching them and empowering them, because I feel like if they can understand their diagnosis, they would be more likely to follow the plan. Additionally, I know most patients don't want to take medications, so I also like to teach them, the pros, the cons of taking the medication. So I think overall, kind of like what Flora said, is establishing that connection with them and just empowering them to take charge of their health.
I love that as well. One thing that a doctor out here where I go to, his name is Dr. Cesar Padilla. He's a double certified anesthesiologist. He was telling me and trying to reassure me that, we might struggle sometimes, right? Underrepresented minorities, we might struggle in the didactic years and, even maybe in rotation clerkship years. But he was telling me that we thrive like once we're practicing or like for the most part rotating, because like if we're treating our population like we, just as one of you guys mentioned how the patients might feel more comfortable, right, when we walk in the room and speak their language, or just like be able to understand them, or be an underrepresented minority. I think we ourselves also become a little bit more confident when we walk in the room and are able to treat, right, and communicate and simplify complex diseases or treatments, to someone, who might have a language barrier. So that itself, I think we should like keep that in mind and have confidence in ourselves. Like Mario mentioned, most of you guys mentioned, I'm struggling with confidence as well. Whether it be like just those little insecurities or imposter syndrome or whatever. But yeah. And then Josh, is there something you want to add? If not, we can ask another question. Up to you.
Yeah, so I think my favorite part about this whole now that I'm in practice and everything, and even during my rotations, I can probably say ditto for some of the things that Josh said for sure, is definitely I really loved my emergency medicine rotations. So my aspect looks a little bit different from some of y'all's practices for sure. But I think in my scenario, it's more that these patients are one, either really sick, really scared, coming into the emergency room, think that they have something that could potentially, put them in the hospital, one, or that could essentially that they could die from in their eyes and in their perspective. So giving them that reassurance that one, we're either, helping them move through that whole scenario that, hey, and explaining this isn't what you think it is, this is what it is, and kind of just teaching them the aspect of what's actually going on with their body or their symptoms. And then two is if they are having one of those, life-threatening comorbidities or even symptoms, then it's more just reassuring them that, we're there to help and, get them through that hard time in their lives. So with them and their family, of course.
Love that. Love that. My background is in emergency medicine as like a ER tech and EMT, and really even at that time, like I was able to reassure patients, but it's different when you're like the provider, when you're the one with like the stethoscope around your neck and like the patients are looking to you. They're coming to you with their questions and coming to you with their worries. And so it's awesome to hear that you're able to offer that reassurance in that capacity. Love it. So we do have questions that Omar and I had kind of drafted out just in case we didn't have our attendees ask, but it looks like we have quite a few in the Q&A. And so we will start off with just asking those questions, because again, we're here for all the students who have logged in today, and we thank you for joining us on this Sunday night. And we'll start with the first one. And again, this doesn't have to be answered by everyone. Whoever wants to, add to the answer or take the lead, it's totally up to you guys. And this is just going to be kind of more of an organic conversation Q&A. And so, the first question is, what did you guys do to make your application stand out? And so, again, this student is asking what we did to make our PA school application stand out. And so, whoever wants to take the lead, you can go ahead.
I'll start with this one. I feel like my PCE was very unique from other people who applied to PA schools. So I worked a year and a half before PA school as a tissue harvester. So I worked in the organ and tissue transplant field. After people passed away, I was in charge of harvesting skin, bone, tendons, all that for donation purposes. And so I feel like that PCE that I had before really made me stand out as an applicant, because at every interview I did, people were saying, oh, you're the first person we've ever met with that kind of experience. We've never met anyone who did that field. And it was my application was a lot of them going back and forth with me about that job, wanting to know more about the side of organ and tissue harvesting, because it's not something that's, typically done from people. So I feel like even though there were aspects of my application that I feel like weren't as strong, I didn't have the best GPA, my GRE score wasn't the highest, but that PCE that I had, just that experience really, I feel like carried me through my interviews and application process. So it definitely stood out. Definitely got some wide eyes during the interview process from the interviewers, but it was it's a good conversation starter, and during the interviews, and I feel like that really helped me stand out as an applicant.
And just because I'm curious, Renee, how many hours did you have as that, or like in total as your patient care experiences?
It was about around somewhere 600 to 800, I think. I did it for about a year and a half. So, and it was kind of hard to keep track of the time schedule because I was on call for 24-hour shifts for those. So it was kind of, I don't really know exactly how many hours, but I think it was roughly about 600 to 800.
Flora or Sonia, did you guys, or Josh? I just saw you turned your camera on, so we'll let you.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. So I think one thing that helped me stand out definitely was, again, like patient care experience. And I think understanding the college that you're applying to helps goes a long way. Like, do your research, look at their mission statement, what they're looking for. And sometimes you can even cater into like the certain interview questions and stuff like that. When you get to that aspect, you can cater some of your answers and kind of work around in kind of playing into that whole mission statement going into the interview process. But definitely patient care experience. I worked as a medical assistant for about, say, a little over 2 years, 2.5 years. And I think I had over 1,000. I couldn't really tally it all as much because I worked 12-hour shifts in an urgent care. But yeah, I think honestly, just finding a way to help yourself stand out from others, because everybody's going to have the same answer, and that that question is coming. Why do you want to go into the medical field? Why do you want to go and into PA school? And majority of the answers, about at least 7 out of 10 people are going to say, because I want to help people. And you don't want to be the person that says, I just want to help people and I want to better people's lives, because 7 other people are going to say that same answer. So finding ways to really get creative with your answer. And I think if I remember right, I think mine was, my grandpa got diagnosed with multiple myeloma back whenever I was in undergrad. So, I got exposed to the medical field in all its actuality, with doctors, specialists, with PAs, NPs, and the whole lot. So I got to see a whole different aspect of medicine, through my grandpa. So I think that really stood out, that whoever was looking at my interview and my application really saw that this was a way that was introduced medicine to me, instead of the whole generic tell that I just want to help people. So finding a way to get creative with your answers and what you can put on your application can go a long way for sure.
Love that answer. And I think one of the best ways to put it simply, to get creative means to tell your story, because every one of you who is interested in applying, you have your own unique lived experiences, and that shapes the way you view the world and the type of provider that you're going to be and how you're going to interact with patients. And so when you do get that question, like, why do you want to be a PA or why medicine? The best thing, the most creative thing you can do is just tell your story of how you were introduced, how, that family member in your own family, how they went through that process of accessing healthcare, and you were right by their side and noticed things and were motivated to apply and get to this point. Yeah, because if I'm pretty sure if we went across the room of the panelists tonight, everyone would highlight the fact that during the interview they told stories, they told their own unique story. And that's really, when Josh says get creative, it means don't be afraid to tell your story, and even appropriately be vulnerable to tell those details that have shaped you and maybe challenged you and grown you into the like student that you're going to be. Yeah. Did Flora or Sonia, did you guys want to add anything to that question?
I could add a little bit. So I feel like my application when I applied was very basic. I always joke with people, I was like, it was my practice run when I first applied because I was not confident at all with my application. My science GPA was not the best. My overall GPA was decent. But you know, my hours were at the bare minimum as well to apply. So what I think really helped me out was my personal statement, but having people back up that. So my letters of rec, I was able to get to 2 letters of rec from people that I had known for about 3 to 4 years. And I felt like they were able to not only like show, like, you know, with my personal statement, I was able to tell my story, but I felt with my letters of rec, those people were able to back up that story saying, yes, this person has a great work ethic. And, you know, I don't know exactly what they put in those letters, but I have a strong feeling that, you know, thanks to them, I was able to get into PA school. So make connections with people who are going to write your letters of rec. Don't just ask randomly. Make sure you make connections with people because they could be a good part of why you get into school.
That's very, very, very true, because a strong letter of rec can really go a long way. And on the opposite side of that thing, a like okay letter of rec can actually hurt your chances, or like a generic letter of rec can just essentially wreck your chances of getting in. All right, so we'll go into the next question, and Sonia, I'll let you take the lead on this one if it's okay with you. And what do you wish you knew before going to PA school? And so I imagine in this situation, you're a student who's gotten that letter of acceptance, and you're set to start in a few months. What would you tell yourself in that situation?
I would tell myself to be ready for whatever's coming our way, especially because when I started PA school, I started it during the pandemic. So everything was through Zoom. And as I don't know, probably a lot of us like STEM majors have a type of personality where we like to plan things out. And during PA school, as much as I wanted to plan things out, it was very unpredictable. So definitely having that flexibility, that personality that you're open to new changes and just being very open to, you know, the exam being changed or lectures not being uploaded, things like that. Just be more flexible in general.
Oh man, I felt that one. It's like the littlest things make you like break you, like the lectures not being posted or the PowerPoints not being like posted right before school starts. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that was like a comment. I feel like every other email I got from my program was like, "Thank you for being flexible," or the request to be flexible. And so yeah, if you're not into gymnastics or yoga, we definitely recommend it. All right, and I guess before we move on from that question, Renee or Josh, I think Josh is transitioning to his computer. I'll let you, Renee. Was there anything that you wish you knew before you started your program?
Honestly, I think y'all kind of talked on everything, you know, being flexible. I can't remember how many times me and Renee went to the same program. So it was a lot of thank you for being flexible, or, hey, you know, last minute change. And, you know, when they say that whatever you put on your resume, they can kind of harp on. I remember I put, oh, I'm flexible. I can do this. I can adjust to the situation. And I'll tell you firsthand that they tested pretty well, honestly, throughout didactic and clinical years. So yeah, I definitely being able to be flexible and kind of go with the flow and just adjust to any kind of situation goes a long way for sure.
All right. Unless anyone wants to further answer that question, we can move on to the next question. Anonymous attendee asked, as medical practitioners, how do you deal with various quote unquote egos in the hospital?
I could start this one off. So I don't work in a hospital, but this did happen to me while I was a PA student. I was at the UC Davis ER, and so there was this point where I had to ask help because I was trying to look for a translating device, and I asked one of the nurses, and she was completely rude to me, and like she just blew me off. And I went back and like I figured it out. I ended up finding this translating device, and I go back to talk to the patient, and this nurse comes up to me and she's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were a PA student. I thought you were one of the techs because you're wearing burgundy scrubs. And so at that moment, like, I was so frustrated because I was like, why are we treating people differently based off of what job description they have? And the only thing I said to her was like, oh, I didn't know that we had to treat people differently because of the scrubs they were wearing. And like, you could just tell she was like super embarrassed because it's true. It's like, why should we treat people differently? So like, instead of like, responding badly or being defiant, I just kind of gave her like a question to kind of think about. And hopefully she went back and thought about that. And hopefully she doesn't do that to somebody else, because if I felt bad the way she was treating me, I'm sure somebody else felt the same way. And if they're a tech, I could just only imagine how their life is in there. So I would say just, don't react, because, sometimes I feel like as Latinas, we might want to react a certain way. So like, just let them know politely, like, this is not the way to treat people, because it's going to happen, unfortunately. And, there's times where even as a PA, the paramedics come in and they're kind of like, oh, who are you to decide these things, that this is an emergency? And so it's kind of upsetting, but, just keeping your calm and then just like educating them a little bit of the situation.
Hit the
I
nail
agree. I
on
think
the
with
head.
medicine, échale.
Oh no, I was gonna say you hit the nail on the head, Flora. Like
Mm.
that, and the reality is whether you're a nurse, whether you're a doc, an MDDO, or a PA, like at some point to get to this point of becoming a medical provider, you've had to do some of that grunt work, as a tech, as an EMT, as a scribe, and so the reality is, for if you're currently a student who's working one of those roles and you're like intimidated by these doctors, by these PAs, know that they were in your shoes at one point. They were undergraduate students at some point. And the other way around, for us as providers, like it's really our job to not forget like where we come from, and the reality that we shouldn't be treating anyone differently, whether they're the CEO of United Healthcare, or you're a patient that is experiencing homelessness, or a CNA or tech that's just cleaning the next room. And so love that you shared that, Flora.
Yeah, and I was going to like basically mention like medicine can be pretty brutal, right? Like, and it varies from department to department, but in general, right, there's like a hierarchy and names and the letters attached to the end of your badge, and that's probably never going to go away. But the best we could do essentially is like try to pick our battles. I think that's important. Knowing when to uh, save our energy for something that might not be worth it, right? Um, but at the same time, like try to change the game whenever in any way, shape, or form, right? Treat the nurse, the RN, the janitor, like anyone as much as the patients, right? And I think that's something that we will probably have to face, for who knows how long, probably forever, right? But like you mentioned, just trying to change the game yourself, I think, is important, and ask those rhetorical questions. Kind of question them. I think and kill them with kindness. I think that's the best thing you can do. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the part of like being resilient is so important. Um, I work in a hospital and I've worked in a couple other hospitals, but I work at a hospital one time and I knew the fellow who was African American who was covering that hospital, and he's probably been there probably a year. So he's been there a few times, but he kept on always getting mistaken for the housekeeper or transport. And we're like, no, he's the surgeon on call or whatever is taking call. And I like asked him one time, like, well, does that and I could tell you this, if you look a certain way, that's gonna happen. And his response was like, well, I know who I am at the end of the day. And if that person is ignorant, that's on them. That's not really on me. But you're gonna have to deal with difficult people, or your whole life. I mean, that's happens. But I think it's how you react to them. And I think there was a quote, it's like 10% is what like life does to you, and 90% how you respond to it. And I think that's like such an important thing, because your value is not in what other people think of you, it's the value that you have in yourself. But I would tell you that like I would be pretty upset getting mistaken for a whole year. And his response was also, it was like, this is the fourth time that it's happened with the same nurse. So it's like, it's not like a one-time thing. And I'm like, but the other part of it too is that I could tell you, I work in an ER as a tech, and um, things have changed quite a bit. So you can't abuse people, and there's mechanisms in the system that you can engage and proceed to do it. It's an HR thing. But at the end of the day, like, is it worth the hassle? And so then that's something that you have to decide for yourself. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a definitely a good point. The times have definitely changed, and there are, at least fortunately, for a lot of our ancillary staff, some protective measures to kind of keep that abuse at bay. But it still happens. Like Flora just provided a perfect example of that. All right. So moving on to our next question. What did a day in your life look like as former PA students? All right, PAs, we're going to have to dig into the PTSD of PA school. And Renee or Sonia, if you guys want to start this one.
I could start it, yeah. I think it looked different based off what year you were in. Kind of like first year with didactic year looked a lot different from the clinical year, I would say. Didactic year was we started off on Zoom and then we kind of transitioned to in person. So even like semester by semester looked a little bit differently. But I'd say on average, probably wake up around 6:37, get ready for school and whatnot, and then drive to campus. Probably be in school from, I think each day differed. Maybe like 8 to 4, 8 to 5 was kind of the standard time you'd be in class. And then with, of course, lunch from 12 to 1. And then afterwards, it kind of, depended on who, you as a person wanted to do after school. If you wanted to study till 1 a.m., 2 a.m., some people did that. Me personally, I would always try to take an hour off after classes ended, maybe from like 4 to 5, 5 to 6, whenever it was, and just kind of decompress, go for a walk, make some dinner, just try not to think about school at least for that hour afterwards. And then from kind of 6 to 10 was usually when I would study for review whatever I just learned, go over stuff that maybe I need to catch up on. Because the thing about PA school, you're never on time with every class. You're always going to be behind in 1 or 2 classes. So it was kind of either catching up on a class or reviewing notes from earlier in the day. And then kind of just doing that Monday through Friday. I always took Friday afternoons off. So after class Friday, no matter how behind I was, no matter what I needed to look at, whatever I needed to get done in school, I would put my backpack to the side. And Friday afternoon was my time to do whatever I wanted, go out, watch TV, dissociate, whatever it was. That was kind of my me time. And then I'd sleep in as late as possible for Saturday, whether it was whatever time I got up Saturday was kind of when I would just start studying from then on for the rest of that day, whether it was 8 a.m. or 2 p.m. Just kind of, I would try to let myself sleep in as much as possible on a Saturday. So that's kind of how didactic looked like for the first year. And then clinical year, it kind of varied based on your rotation. Most of my rotations were pretty standard, like 8 to 5 or 9 to 4 clinic type or hospital. But then you have those more intense rotations like internal medicine. I would be on call from like 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Mondays and Fridays. And every day I would do at least a 12-hour shift. So that kind of varied, but clinical year was a bit nicer that after it kind of felt like a job, after rotations, I'd kind of just do whatever I wanted. Didn't really focus much on the studying for the EORs until the EOR was coming up closer, which is their end of rotation exam. So yeah, it just kind of varied based on what rotation you were on for the clinical year side of things.
And Sonia, would you add to that? I mean, it sounds pretty, I think, similar to kind of the experience we had at UC Davis. And so for anyone who doesn't know, Flora, myself, and Sonia, we all are UC Davis alumni. And yeah, like how Renee said, I think the didactic versus clinical differences is kind of a universal experience for PA students. But in general, I would say clinical years a bit it's much better than didactic. Just there's a lot more time to I like the word you use, dissociate.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, moving forward, someone asked, how can I make myself a better candidate for a PA school? I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I have been taking prerequisite courses and working as an EMT. However, that is all I have done. Does anyone have anything to add to that specifically? Okay, I can go ahead and take this one. I mean, the lowest hanging fruit, essentially, I would say, is like try to stack on responsibilities to like what you already have. So if you're an EMT, right, you could like just talk to. I mean, first of all, make the best experience you can, right? Start to talk and build relationships, friendships with paramedics or a manager at your company. On top of that, maybe ask for additional responsibilities. So maybe take up a leadership role and start training EMTs, right? That's another when you get more hours, it's still considered paid clinical experience, and maybe get paid at least like 25 cents more, which is wow, right? But at the very least, yeah, at the very least, you get that leadership experience in a hospital or in like the hospital setting or medicine in general, which is something as PAs, right, are going to have to take on leadership roles, or just being PAs is essentially being a leader, right? And then you can just like um, really focus on that on your interviews, and make it echo throughout your entire like application. If you enjoy your degree in psychology, you could really first of all, same thing, try to build friendships with some of your professors, and maybe try to see if one of your professors that you build a friendship with have a research lab or interest, and try to work with them. One, you get the research experience, and then two, right, you can get a letter of rec from someone who is a professor and at the same time a researcher. And then you said EMT and psychology. Yeah, I would say that's the best thing to do. I mean, I'm not sure if you have some volunteering experience, like at a food clinic, like a pantry. What are they called?
Like a
Food
soup
bank.
kitchen or a
Yeah,
food
food
bank.
bank. Yeah. Hmm. So if you haven't already, I think adding volunteer could be pretty beneficial as well. Yeah. Anyone have anything to add?
I would just add that the big thing with volunteer work is you definitely want to, if you can, have quality over quantity. And so being involved in a bunch of different like clubs, and where you did one thing and then you never did it again, and that is less impressive compared to a student who has like committed to a club and was part of that club for like a year, and then you took on a leadership role, and really kind of like Omar said, taking on additional responsibilities, and also having that continuity of being involved and committing to something for 1, 2, or 3 years. And that speaks volumes to your character, to your habits, to the ability to stick with something for a long time. And yeah, and any of our PAs want to chime in a little?
Just want to add one small thing too. I would say if there's anything that you feel like is like a red flag on your application, like say for example, if you don't have enough volunteer hours, work on getting more volunteer hours, but also your grades. So if there's a class that maybe you didn't do so hot on, maybe trying retaking it at a community college, that could also help show that you're improving grades and you're still committed to improving your application.
Solid. Josh was there. Don't know if you were gonna add something.
Honestly, I know. I think y'all pretty much hit it on the head with that. It's really just honing your skills and making your application stronger with what's best for you. Y'all hit it on the head. Whatever volunteer experience y'all need, just sticking with that. Definitely repeating classes if you felt like your GPA wasn't that high. I know mine personally wasn't. I think I graduated with a 3.49 or 3.48 or something coming out of undergrad. So I know it wasn't the best. So I knew the best way that I possibly, because I didn't want to go back and repeat classes personally, I said I was going to go out there and work and get the patient care experience as high as I could and make my application better that way. So there's different routes you can definitely take to making your application a lot stronger.
That's a really good point to make too, that there's no one perfect application. There are like many different roads to the same point of getting accepted, and a student may have really high GPA and GRE scores and not that high of patient care hours. There may be another student with a lower GPA with even higher hours. Since you mentioned, Josh, your GPA, if everyone's comfortable, would it be okay if we went around the room and just kind of, if we remember, kind of shout out our GPAs in undergrad? My GPA, I think my undergrad overall was like a 3.3, and then my science GPA was a little bit lower than that, like 3.29. And then I'll hand off the hot potato to you, Renee.
I think we're twinning there. My science GPA was also like a 3.2, and then my overall GPA was there like a 3.36, 3.35. I don't know. It was on the lower end of the average,
Okay.
but kind of like Josh said, making the other aspects of your application stronger definitely helps. I know that my GPA wasn't the strong part of my application, so I said, okay, I'm gonna make sure my personal statement is the best personal statement I could write. Let me make sure my letters of rec are coming from people who really know me, and I kind of, with the letters of rec, I made sure that each person, like I talked to them personally and said, look, this is what I want you to highlight about me. I want this letter of rec to highlight my work ethic. I want this letter of rec to highlight, my strengths academically and all of that. So kind of made sure that every other aspect of the application was strong enough to kind of overshadow the lower GPA that I had.
All right, and then we'll hand the hot potato to Sonia. What was your undergrad and science GPA, if you can remember?
My science GPA was 4.0, but I did take a very long time in completing my physiology classes. I worked full time as a medical assistant, and I would only take one science class at a time because, as you know, those are really hard. And I knew that I'm not the best test taker, so I knew that the GRE was going to be tough for me. So I really planned it all out, to chemistry, just one class, anatomy, just one class. I really focused on that science classes. Overall, I believe it was a 3.6.
Very cool. And was it ever, because I mean, I'm learning this too as a lower GPA applicant myself, like was it ever brought up in interviews, like the fact that you only took like one course at a time, which I imagine the answer is no, right?
No, it was never brought up. And also another thing is that most of my science classes I took at the community college. So everything except immunology and I believe genetics was at a community college. And no one ever asked anything. Yeah, it was never brought up.
Yeah, and so for the students here watching, programs aren't going to be asking you where you took your science courses at, whether you took them at Harvard, UCLA, or your local CC. And then the other point that Sonia's making here is, however you structure your schedule, whether it's taking one course at a time or 4 courses at a time, again, that is totally up to you, and that's not something that is going to be like questioned.
Yeah, I think that's why Sonia is the I think Sonia hit it on the head, and I think the person that was asking the question, oh, I'm taking classes and I'm working, like that's the reality for most people. And if you have other responsibilities like family, siblings, other things, I think the Greek, is the Greek philosopher was like, physicians, know thyself. It's kind of like you have to take a self-assessment in your life, in your predicament. Like you can't live somebody else's life. If somebody's taking 7 science classes and is working 50 hours and is the CEO of a small company and and doing research for a Nobel laureate, like that's great. That's their reality and that's how they're able to do it. If you're immortal, then you not be able to do it. And so you just have to um you have to kind of make those adjustments for your own life. And it is better to have a 4.0 GPA on your science courses than a 2.0 and then spending, you know, next couple of years trying to raising that GPA is much, much harder than doing it right the first time. And I think Sonia is the epitome, the model and the epitome of that. So
Very good point, Juven. All right, hot potato to Flora. What was your GPA?
So I wasn't that big of a star. So my overall, I think I was a 3.5 overall. My science was not so great. I was at a 2.89 when I applied, and I was a first-time applicant. I was able to get in with that GPA. So just know, if you're struggling with that low GPA, there's other aspects of your application to help with that. In the meantime, I was taking other courses because, like I mentioned earlier, this was my test run when I first applied. So I made sure that I was taking other science courses to help my science GPA. But if you're struggling with the low GPA, it's not the end of the world. You still have a chance. We're more than just a number.
That's true. That's true. And that's why there's so many questions and so many areas to write about your experiences and things on CASPA, because it's not just your GPA. Because if it was like that, then that's all we would submit and that's all that PA schools would care about. But they don't. They want to hear your story, your personal statement, and all of those things. Omar, what was your GPA?
I can take it. I think my overall GPA was like a 3.51, although when I went back to look at my application recently, it was like a 3.49. So I was like, whoa, I never checked. And I was hurt a little bit, but I mean, I must have miscalculated that. But yeah, 3.49 or so. And then my science GPA, I'm actually not quite sure, but I do remember my like 60 unit, like previous 60 unit GPA for science. And that was right around like 3.7 something. But the take home message is that I think my science GPA was lower, maybe like 3.2 or 1 something. The take home message is like the trend of your GPA. Some of us get off to a really bad start, or somewhere in the middle, something happens, life happens, and your grades drop, your grades suffer. And I think something that Flora said earlier was essentially like also to be able to address the failures in the quote unquote failures, right? The things that you might consider a failure, right? So like your GPA dropping or you failing a class. I think addressing it is a very mature thing, and it's actually a strength because you're able to tell and explain why, and not in a way to show like give excuses, but to show them how you have grown since then and what you learned from that situation or situations. For me, I addressed it. I mean, my first time I took 3 science courses, like it just like literally demolished me. And I addressed it. I said, it was a big swing and a miss. And my whole like resume, or sorry, my whole application or personal statement was like tied around baseball. So, and they actually mentioned that, like they actually asked me like, "Yo, you mentioned it was a swing and a miss during interviews," and I addressed it, and I think it was a strength rather than a weakness. And then you can just mention how like sometimes your failures, like you get more out of your failures than your triumphs, because you learn basically from your errors. I got off track a little bit, but also telling your story. So I think the GPA was not the best thing for me. Maybe the trend helped me as well, but everything else. So like that continuity that Mario was talking about, like working or sticking with something and making the best out of it, and then obviously like trying to get those letter of recs. Now I think the one exception too to like be like feel comfortable with moving around is if you truly don't enjoy what you're doing. Like for research, I think a lot of us just whatever they give us, and then we'll take it, but like after a certain amount of hours, like we just get a little burnt out and it becomes difficult to continue with like research or volunteer or whatever that situation is. But I think also telling my story. So telling your story is very important, and I think it's very strange to tell your story. I don't think I don't know if it's just me, but like I think as minorities, we're like not really taught to stand out, jump out of the box essentially. So I don't think, I mean, I didn't know how to tell my story. It took a lot of practice to be able to do that. And I think it's an art, and it sucks that they don't teach that. You kind of learn it on your own, sadly, but like with the right guidance and right help and a good amount of practice, you'll be able to tell your story in a confident and like not arrogant way. But then again, I think that's an art.
Yeah. And just since we're on the topic of GPA, someone asked, does retaking a course hurt your application? And the 100% answer for that is no, it does not. No, it does not. It really, again, if you like end up getting, like in my situation, I had I think like a C or an F in a microbiology course, something like that. And then I retook it. In that course, I took it at UCLA. And then I retook that course at my local CC and got an A. And it was something that was never asked about. It's not something that I think hindered my application. And again, retaking a course won't hurt your application. I think the only situation where it would hurt is if you get either the same grade or lower grade. That would probably raise some eyebrows. But again, if you're retaking a course, I imagine you've probably grown in your study techniques, and you're probably a bit more mature than the first time you took it. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's also important. I will add, like, I think like even like the general like pre-med, everyone medicine is like, you should take courses in like institutions, big institutions. But then that is not the whole context, right? It's expensive for some of these universities we're going to. And I think you might as well save the amount of money and do your best to get a good grade. So, and then maybe, I mean, they're not going to bring that up, but if they ever do, should maybe raise a red flag, but then you could just explain to them like, hey, like I work, it's the cheaper route, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the professor, and yeah. But anywho.
And then
one last thing to add about, now that we're in GPAs, I just wanted to point out that I do have 2 W's, and it was also never asked about, and it wasn't counted negatively on my transcript or anything like that.
I have the same situation. I had, I think, a WU because I didn't go to the final for my OChem class because I skipped out on it because I was like, if I go to this final, I'm not going to have enough time to study for my bio class, which I am going to pass. And so I decided to just take the L on that one. I didn't retake it because OChem was just not my thing. And I knew if I retook it, I was possibly going to fail again. So I just decided what was best for me is to just take other courses at the community college that I hadn't taken during undergrad. So, it's okay to have those W's or F's on your application as long as you show that, there's some growth in the other aspects.
Yeah. And really one of the things that Flora and Sonia, you guys are hitting at is like being tactful. Or having like a strategy as you're approaching these courses, and when you're like struggling with one, but you're passing another, kind of, like you said, tactfully taking that quote unquote L, but really thinking long term and kind of swallowing your pride and saying like, this is what ultimately is going to result in a higher GPA based on the current circumstances. And so I love that you two highlighted that. And then Josh, and we kind of haven't gone to you. We want to hear, if it's okay with you, your GPA, your undergrad GPA and science GPA, if you can remember that.
I remember my overall GPA was 3.49 because I know I didn't get once you get past like 3.5 at my institution, it was like I think it was like, it wasn't summa cum laude, but it was like cum laude or so, it was something like that. I can't remember what it was, but I didn't make that, and I was kind of hurt about that. And so but then my science GPA actually made up for, I think I had like maybe a 3, it was above 3.6, 3.7, something like that. But I weighed heavy on, and that's what I really enjoyed taking, was those kind of classes. My classes that I really struggled in was probably, I think it was like immunology and serology is one that definitely like tanked my grade. I had a lot of personal issues going on at the time, so it kind of definitely affected my grades that semester. So And I definitely tried to, I have an answer, I had an answer for if they did pose the question like, hey, like we noticed that, this, class that you took, you didn't do as well. Like, what did you learn from it? Or like, why was that? I did have an answer just in case they did ask, but like some of y'all were highlighting, majority of the time, they're not going to even bat an eye on, oh, like they did so well on these other classes. What was going on with this class? As long as you have a good overall general application and strong application overall, they're not going to question, like, it's not going to make or break you at the end of the day, as far as whether you get in or you don't get in. It's nothing like that. So
Yeah, and then really, if a program is willing to offer you an interview, that means that they've already seen your grades and they are okay with what they've seen on paper. And so just know that they're not gonna look at your application, offer you an interview, and then be like, well, what about this grade? What about this grade? And then you give your answer like, nah, we're not gonna offer you an acceptance. That's generally not how programs are doing admissions. And kind of since we're on the topic, another student asked this great question: what tips can we offer to have success in the PA school interview process? And I think we've kind of been sprinkling the answer to this question with all of these topics that we've already discussed. But if I were to, I'll just take the lead on this one. And the biggest thing is, again, what we've already said is the power of storytelling and telling your unique story. Because one, that's your own lived experience, and two, it's unique to you. That's what's going to make you memorable. Of course, you can prepare as much as you can, rehearse as much as you can, and read all of the PA school interview books that are available on Amazon, and those are going to be great templates. But even though those templates have a essentially cookie cutter answer, use that and bring in your own story, your own experiences, because again, that is the difference between a generic interview answer and an amazing interview answer. And a great story can essentially overcome things like you saying or like, or having that little nervousness that a lot of these interviewers are gonna look at. And sometimes it can be distracting, but that can be overshadowed if you tell a great story. And again, with the storytelling, again, and then the final thing I'll say about that is that that's ultimately at a basic human level what like we connect with. Like anytime you're hanging around family and friends, like what are you doing? You're telling stories. Like even if it's like what happened to you at the grocery store and that like someone almost run you over and then they flipped you off, like that's still a story that you're telling to someone, and it has a climax, it has a beginning, a middle, and end. And that's really the biggest advice that I can give any student with an upcoming interview, is really hone in to the art of storytelling. And then before we move on from that question, does anyone else have anything to add for that?
I could add something to that. I would say don't be afraid to share something that makes you different. I remember because we did a group interview at UC Davis, and I remember everybody had very similar experiences. So try to bring something in different. So I remember when they asked one of our questions about, I don't remember exact question, it's been a couple years already. It was something about like a leadership role. And I talked about being a mentor. Like I was a tutor for second and third graders, and I also worked with UCSF where I was a mentor. And then just being able to share my passion with just being a mentor to students, that was like, it's something outside of medicine. I felt like that also helped me because I was able to be a little different than everybody else in the room. And I remember this other guy talked about being a leader in skiing. And so out of all the people that were interviewed, I remember him because he was talking about skiing, which was very different. So you don't be afraid to add and share something that's different about you. That's even if it's not related to medicine, if you feel like you're able to transfer those skills or that passion so they can see that you are a passionate person, I feel like that's also a big win.
All right. I'm not sure if we asked this question, but I am going to address ask Andrew's question, since he has killed two birds with one stone. Oh, we did answer because it's gone. Oh well. So a follow-up question from Andrew: could you share some of the questions that you were asked during the interviews? Thank you for your time, with two exclamation points. I guess I could take the lead with that one. Shameless plug. I do have a video or two videos on my Instagram about the like specific questions and like how much time you should probably dedicate to answering those questions. The two heavy hitter questions I would say are YPA school and tell me a little bit about yourself. That you should. There's a lot, right? You could probably tell an entire story, especially if you're good at telling stories, right? On and on and on. But you're gonna lose the interviewers' attention if you go on for more than 2 minutes for those. Typically, everything else, I would say, keep it at a minute or less. And for some things, a minute sounds like too short, and it might be too long for some questions. One question I remember they asked me was just completely threw me off, and I couldn't even think. It was, tell me a time when you advocated for diversity, and I was like, I couldn't wrap my head around that question. I'm like, what do you mean? Like I like Mexican? Like what way? Like I was literally shocked. I couldn't answer the question, and I asked him twice. I was like, can you give me some time? So first of all, I think asking for a time instead of just throwing like spaghetti at the wall is very important. I did it twice. I maybe spent like 30 seconds or so trying to think. And as there was like a Mexican flag behind my camera. But other questions, unless you guys have some, are like, what do you see yourself in 5 years? What do you see yourself in 10 years? They even asked, like, what do you think about the physician assistant versus physician associate name? I think it was more relevant when I was applying, but also a whole bunch of random things. I think for also to make it memorable, as a couple of us were saying, make it your own. And I think, for example, when they ask me a little bit about myself, or they ask me, tell me something we can't see in your application that's not on your application. I mentioned I have a Hot Wheel collection since I was a little kid, and literally the day of the white coat ceremony orientation, they're basically hyping us up. They're like, oh, we had PAs, or we have students here and there and there. We have students that were this and that. And even mentioned we have a student who has like a Hot Wheel collection. So little things like that do come a long way, especially if you attach some emotion in context to like whatever you mentioned. So those are quite a few. Anyone else have something to add?
Love that. I think I would. Oh, go ahead, Sonia. Go ahead. No, I've been here for the last 4 sessions.
Okay,
Yeah, we're tired of Mario, so.
I wanted to go back to the question before, which is kind of both of these questions are related. But what I did, I had a lot of fun practicing for the interview by just taking a camera and record yourself answering all these questions. I typed up like the 50 most common questions. And I feel like after, doing some research, I think what comes off across is your confidence, right? And if you don't feel confident answering those questions, then you might hit a bump or two. So what helped me a lot was recording myself and seeing where the ums and buts and those little fill-in words. That's where I really, really spent my time just making sure that I was answering the questions correctly. And I also actually wrote out the answers for many of these questions, and I wrote it out with the story, because as everyone is saying, you want to tell your story, right? You do want to make sure that that comes across, and at the end of the day, people will remember how you made them feel, right? So if you can tell a good story, say it from the heart and actually make them feel some type of way, you will send out. And my goal during that interview was to make someone laugh, and I accomplished that goal. And I feel that's the only reason that I was actually accepted into UCD, because I did come out and then I felt confident after, I achieved my goal, made someone laugh.
I've been looking for the clapping sticker emoji for all of y'all, and I can't find it, by the way. But yeah, I'm like clapping in my mind, by the way.
My goal during my interview was to make someone cry. No, I'm joking. No, that's yeah, no, but this is amazing advice. The other additional thing specifically for interviews that I would add is also be prepared for like an ethical question scenario, whether you're going to be answering that in a group interview format or individually. Like PA schools are going to essentially want to hear how you would approach a certain question. Let me give you an example. Like, you have a patient who is following up. You're at a community health center, and this patient was diagnosed with HIV, and they are following up. And after talking to them, you are responsible for giving them the diagnosis, and also informing them of their options. And so that question, the people asking you that question will want to know, what would you tell the patient? Would you tell anyone else? Who would you inform? And what would that discussion look like? And I think the biggest advice that I can give to any student for that question is that there is a right answer and a wrong answer, but the right answer involves not pigeonholing yourself into one specific situation. For example, like if there was a husband that came in and tested positive for HIV, and then the interviewer asked you like, oh, well, would you tell his wife? And immediately you respond by saying, no, I will never break HIPAA. I'm not going to tell his wife. Of course, like I will never do that. That would be an example of you pigeonholing yourself, because the reality is that in these situations, despite there being HIPAA in this example, there are also mandated reporting laws. And so one of the conversations that your answer should include is the fact that you're going to inform the husband, the patient in this scenario, that even though you will respect HIPAA and you won't yourself tell his partner, that partner may find out by the local health agency or department. And so again, for these ethical questions, be ready for them. And yeah, then don't pigeonhole yourself into one specific answer. Really try to take a bird's eye view to kind of consider all of the different answers and different details that are involved in these types of ethical scenarios. Yeah. Before we move on to the rest of the questions, does anyone else have anything to add for interview advice specifically?
I had a similar ethical question like that at one of my school interviews. It wasn't for Texas Tech, it was for another university, which I think, as Josh mentioned earlier, definitely do your research on the schools and what kind of school you're interviewing to, because little did I know this was a faith-based university. And so a lot of their questions that they were asking me were based on like faith and religion. And so this question that I got was, it was a patient scenario of this, they said, imagine you're a pediatric surgeon going into a room, and your patient is a 9-year-old girl who requires this life-saving amputation of both of her legs because of some bacterial infection. In the back of my head, I was like, well, first of all, like, I'm not going to be a pediatric surgeon, but okay, I'll try to answer this question. It was like, what would you tell the mother in this scenario? And so give an answer. And then they said, okay, now what if the mother refuses the surgery because it conflicts with her beliefs? Like, how would you tackle that approach? And then, after you gave an answer to that, they said, okay, now what would you tell the little girl if she looked at you and said, I don't want to die? So I think that was a little more of an intense question that was definitely the hardest question I got asked of any PA school interview. My interview with Texas Tech was the complete 180 of that. It was very chill, very laid back, the same basic questions: why be a PA, why PA not NP, PA not a doctor. And it was more of a conversation type interview, but definitely just be prepared for those left curveball questions that they could throw at you, because like I wasn't expecting that question at all. And that interview, I don't think it definitely didn't go in my favor. They told me the next day that I didn't get in the program. So I was like, well, okay, on to the next one. But so yeah, but definitely most of the questions were the standard ones that everyone mentioned, the YPA. You can look up a lot of YouTube videos. That's what I did to prepare for my interview, was a lot of YouTube videos of, PA school common questions or something. And I just watched a bunch of different people share what questions that they got asked in their interviews. And it tracked pretty well with the questions that I got asked.
And it was like, I don't want to be a pediatric surgeon anyways. Right?
No, literally, it was like, first of all, you're putting me in the scenario I will never be in. So let's just start there.
All right. So we have quite a bit of other questions, and I want to let all the students who have joined us know that I have given the green light to all of our panelists, and we're going to continue for the last 15 minutes to answer questions verbally, but we're also going to be typing up answers to make sure that we get through all of the questions that you guys have. And so, yeah, I will take Belinda's question. And this, she's asking, what do you recommend for new STEM students who are interested in going to medical school? Is going through medical school very challenging? And how can they best prepare for an undergraduate program? Do you recommend majoring in a field related to science? So I would tell you, Belinda, and the first thing is that as the panelists here, we are all physician assistants, so we have not actually gone through medical school. We've gone through PA programs, and medical school and PA school are two different careers in medicine. And so I think the big thing that I would advise is kind of one of the things Renee already hinted at is really doing your research and using tools like YouTube and literally searching on there, like what is the difference between medical school versus PA school? What's the difference between a doctor and a PA, or an MD and a PA? And there's so much free content on there to really just help you gain more insight into not only how to get into PA school, but also in your situation, if you're interested in becoming an MD or DO physician, how to get into an MD or DO program. And then again, I will plug Pre-Med CC. They have their own YouTube channel and have interviewed many physicians, doctors, a lot of underrepresented minorities in medicine, program directors from both MD and PA programs. And you can find all of that information at the Pre-Med CC YouTube channel. And then one of the other things that I would add is that the prereqs for PA school versus MD school are very similar. I think one of the biggest things that is different between PAs and MDs is that for a PA student to gain admission, you're typically required to have some form of direct patient care experience that's paid. And what that looks like is working as either a CNA, a certified nurse's assistant, as a medical assistant, as a scribe, or as an EMT, like a lot of us did, or as a, what was your role, Renee? A transplant surgeon? What were you?
Yeah, it's called a tissue procurement specialist, but I just kind of say a tissue harvester, you know.
Pretty cool. But yeah.
So not a pediatric surgeon. Oh, okay.
And so maybe that's why they asked you that question. They were like, you have some experience cutting with the blades. But yeah, so that would be our or at least my answer for Belinda. And so we appreciate your question. And let's see. And then Sonia is asking, or is answering the next question: how do you guys deal with being confused as a doctor? And I'm sure Sonia is going to mention this in her answer. But really, one of the big things that we do as PAs is, of course, educate patients, because not everyone knows what a PAC is. And so we're able to, again, dive into that, kind of like a car salesman. Like you're gonna sell your profession to your patient and let them know, like, hey, yeah, we're trained at the master's degree level. We have more than 2,000 hours of clinical experiences during our training, and have been in school for almost 7 to 8 years, depending on your path, and then have a background, whether that's EMT, paramedic, or whatever you did before PA school. And really reassuring, again, the patient, right, that we have the training to care for you and provide the best care possible. All right, Erica's question. I like Erica's question, and this one I will let all of us kind of just chime in together. How did you guys go about paying for PA school? As someone who comes from a low-income family, tuition and affording school is constantly on my mind. Any advice? Thanks! Exclamation point. Erica, this is a great question, because again, everyone's financial situation is different, and as we know, PA schools are expensive. They are carísimo, and they're only getting more expensive as the years progress. And then new PA programs are popping up left and right, and they're still charging like an arm and a leg. And so it really, I guess, the big thing, and for most students, right, federal loans is the initial and the most common option for most students. It's applying through FAFSA and taking out those subsidized and unsubsidized loans offered by the federal government. Of course, And it's not everyone has access to that. So if you're like a DACA student, you're not eligible for that type of federal financial aid, and so your situation would be different, and you would probably have to look into private loans. One of the things before I hand the baton off to anyone else is the thing that I would highlight, and the thing that paid for my schooling was the National Health Service Corps, and it also paid for Omar's schooling. And then I'm wondering if anyone else here is an NHSC scholarship recipient. Sonia, Flora. Okay. And so Omar and myself, we were very blessed to essentially get this scholarship that has paid for pretty much all of our tuition and has saved us, upwards of $200,000. And so I would tell you, Erica, to really look into scholarships like the NHSC, the National Health Service Corps, and then look for additional scholarships, especially for like Hispanic students. There's the Hispanic Health Fund. There are specific scholarships available to all students that are offered through the American Academy of PAs, and also the state chapters of PA. So if you're in Texas or you're in California, you can look into that local organization to see if they offer some change to help with that. But the scholarships are out there, guys, and really, if you do your research and you're hungry enough, you can find some of that money lying around. The other thing that I would say is, again, don't be afraid to bite that bullet on taking on those loans. As we know, the PA profession is a great career, and it's one of the top ranked careers back to back over the last decade for a reason. And one of the things, to just put it in perspective, is that we're compensated pretty fairly. If you really think about it, we're being compensated about 1/3 to 1/2 of a MD-DO physician salary, and we have about a quarter of the training just coming out, comparing like a new grad PA and an attending physician. And so that's pretty sweet when you reflect on the fact that you're getting compensated that much. And if you're getting paid a six-figure salary, you should be able to at some point, whether that takes you 2 years, 10 years, or 15 years, pay off those loans. And then there's other programs as well, like the loan forgiveness program, that's also part of the National Health Service Corps. And I'm sure if students were working or as PAs working at federally qualified health centers, like, you can be eligible for those. I feel like I just took over this answer because but yeah, Flora or Sonia, would you guys add anything about paying for PA school?
Yeah, so I'll add a little bit. So, think of this as an investment. It's not money that you're throwing away. I know it sucks to take out these big loans, especially because, I have similar situation, low income parents and everything. So, it was something very scary to do, but there's definitely options out there. So I didn't do the application for the scholarship, but I am doing the loan repayment program. And so I currently work at an FQHC. And so for 2-year commitment, I do get a $50,000 stipend to pay that my student loan. So that's definitely helpful. And then, we do get a pretty good salary, so that also helps. But thinking this way, if I'm going to stay in the Central Valley, there's a lot of the clinics around here are federally qualified. Why not just have the government help me pay these off? So I'm going to stick to being here and, be able to pay those off with those student loan repayment program.
I think I have an idea. So why don't we, each and every one of us, just choose one question and, answer it to the best of our ability. And then if someone really wants to chime in, we can add something. That way we can get through most of these questions.
I just want to do a shameless plug. We did like a whole thing on gaining clinical experience and different certifications, things that you could do short time. And it's like a 2-hour talk. So just check that out. I put that in the chat so you can take a look at it, because I think a lot of people are asking these questions, and I think it's a breakdown, and it's not like a 30-second spot, like how do you become an EMT and stuff. So watch that video. And I also put a bunch of loan repayment programs and all that good stuff in there. There's also loans for student forgiveness, and I'll put all that in there, and you can take a look at it. And I would just say that I think Flora hit it right on the head, is that it is an investment. You are basically getting a piece of paper and skills that is marketable, that is wanted, that is desired. And once you have that PAC, people will be knocking on your door and throwing themselves at you to hire you and give you fat paychecks.
I concur. And yes, I would say utilize pre-med CC and also Mario's videos, which we didn't have back in the day. There's a lot of good and great and amazing content on there in various ways. So I will take one of the questions, and then guys, please feel free to chime in at some point. How, by anonymous attendee, how did you guys go about the question, why PA school instead of MD school? So for me specifically, in my personal statement and in my interviews, I basically mentioned how I, as an EMT, I was able to interact with both PAs and physicians, and I was not only able to do research on my own and Google like what their scope of practice is, but see it in real life, right? In the ER setting, and in every other setting that I shadowed a doctor or a PA. So I think that that comment would be believable on their aspect if you do have those hours to back it up, right? Whether it's paid clinical experience or working in specific or different types of departments and shadowing, different providers. On top of that, I explicitly also mentioned how, as a PA, I can move horizontally through medicine and how that can make me become the best possible medical practitioner I could ever be, right? And not have to like be fixated on one specific specialty. And I mentioned how I am an ever growing and evolving individual, and as time progresses, time passes, we evolve, and so do our interests. Whether they might not be drastic changes, but enough to where you would see yourself be the best possible person, father, practitioner, you can be. So that's sort of how I answer that one. And if anyone has something to add, please do. If not, on to the next question.
And the one thing I will kind of quickly add about this question, the why PA school instead of MD, the first thing I'll say is that isn't a question that would be asked during interviews. That's not something that like PA schools really will look at or ask. And then one of the things that I've seen from some students that I've helped with their personal statements is it's actually kind of common to kind of see in personal statement student write about like how they used to be MD or used to be like a different career or like pursuing nursing, and they spend more than half of their personal statement talking about how you don't want to be an MD or how you don't want to be a nurse and giving all these reasons why. And I think just one of the things that I would want to tell you if you're in that situation is just know that prompt is not asking you to answer why don't you want to be a doctor? Why do you want to be a PA? That prompt is asking you specifically, why do you want to be a PA? And so you really want to make sure that you're not spending the majority of these precious word counts answering a question that hasn't been asked in the personal statement, and put yourself in a position where like the admissions committee reads your statement and they're kind of like, okay, they read between the lines and think like you're only applying because this is like your plan B or something like that. Because the reality is the students that get in, like this is plan A, and it's pretty competitive and comparable to med schools in terms of the admissions rates and the amount of students that apply. Just to put it in perspective, when I applied to UC Davis, they received over 2,000 applications. They, I think, offered around 200-ish interviews for 65 seats. And that is not exclusive or unique to UC Davis. Like this is common across the country for every program, whether that's Duke University, Texas Tech, or USC, or programs on the East Coast. Like it's everywhere, and it's yeah, like a lot of people are interested. And so really you want to make sure that you're addressing these questions and answering the prompt. So we have, I think, 3 more questions left. Josh, I'll let you take over the next question. What should I do if my PA that I shadow doesn't want to write me a letter of recommendation because of my low GPA? Any advice? And then that final.
Yeah, go ahead, Mario.
No, go ahead.
So I think the best thing is, I mean, there's your answer right there. I don't think that you should push that issue and getting that letter of recommendation from that person, because most likely they're not going to write the best letter of recommendation for you. You want somebody that highlights your strengths and doesn't really pick at your weaknesses. I mean, and it's hard to say because it may be the only person that you've shadowed and stuff like that, but find somebody else that will be willing to write and like tell to your strengths and really not really I guess sell out your weaknesses to the programs, because that goes a long way when another PA is coming saying, hey, this person like didn't do so well in school, so I'm not sure why you should be considering them. You don't want that, and you're not going to see that letter 9 times out of 10. They're not going to say, hey, does this look good before I send it in? Some may let you see it and say, hey, this is what I put about you, but if not, then you're kind of just left wondering and guessing. I wonder what they put on there. And, last thing you want is a letter of recommendation that doesn't highlight your strengths. So I think, there's plenty of PAs that are willing to allow you to shadow them and just get to know the profession and stuff like that. So advice is definitely trying to find another PA to see if they can, you can shadow, or just talk to that person directly and ask if there's any other way that you can possibly get a, or why they're so harping on your GPA when you have other kinds of strengths. So you can really go different routes about it. But if it were me personally, I'd probably try to find a different PA to write a letter of recommendation for me. But that's just me personally speaking on that.
I would first thank the person for being honest with you, and I think that's what you want from a letter writer. Like, thank them, shake their hand, hug them, whatever. And then the second thing I would do is run and don't ask him for that, because you don't want to force that. I've read letters from people that just didn't do the due diligence of asking for their letter for something that I used to do, and it's horrible. And it's like, you do not want somebody to write you that kind of letter. So thank that person and then just run away from them. I think I would just say that. But yeah, don't force it. There's plenty of people in your life that like you, that would want to write you a letter. I think you're like, somebody who likes you that is not a PA is better than somebody who's a PA, and for whatever their biases is, and you can't change that person, and like they have their thing, and but I think they're being honest, and I think that yeah, I would be really appreciative of that.
Yeah, and then when you're asking someone for a letter of rec, I think you should make it very clear if they can write you a great, like an emphasis on great letter of rec. That way, they already have that sense of like pressure and the value you see in having a over the top letter of rec. So that's a good way to see. And I've actually, in the past, when I first was getting started, I did ask that question, and the provider was like, hey, based on how much time we spent together, I cannot commit to writing you a great letter of rec. And honestly, like as Juven said, you have to thank people for their transparency, honestly. Yeah. I know, does someone have something to add to that?
No, I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head for.
Oh, I was gonna say, I just wouldn't stress too much too if at the end of the day you can't find a letter of rec from a provider. None of my letters of recommendation actually came from any kind of provider, PA, doctor, anything. 2 of mine were from professors that I got to get know really well, and then another one was from my boss. So it's not the end of the world if you don't have a letter of rec from a provider of any kind, because that definitely didn't hurt me applying for PA school.
All right. And so we pretty much have answered everyone's questions. And then we just got one final question from Veronica. I'll just quickly mention that the actual PA school application timeline, I actually have a video on my YouTube channel at the Mexican PA. and where I break down month to month what exactly you need to be looking for, what things you need to be asking for, and whether that's in January or in February. And so I would advise you to search that up, the PA School application timeline on my channel. And then the last thing, just to be respectful of everyone's time, is if you guys are open to it, dropping our best contact email in the chat for everyone to see. I know all of the panelists who have joined us today are super big on mentorship and have a desire to essentially be a resource for everyone who has been in attendance. And so I would ask you guys, if you guys are comfortable, to share your contact information, your email in the chat. And then as for students, I would recommend you take a screenshot of that. And then if you have any specific questions or resonated with any one of our individual journeys, then you're more than welcome to reach out to us. And this isn't the final session. I had previously seen a student ask about previous sessions or future sessions. There's going to be more of this PA sessions in the future. And this is it for this year, but yeah. And then the next thing, I do want to thank all of the panelists who have joined us today. Renee, thank you so much. Sonia, thank you so much. Josh, thank you. And Flora, thank you. It means a lot for all of us, for you to be here on your weekend and on your days off to give us this deep breath of knowledge and insight into what it is being a practicing provider. And then for everyone who's still logged in, thank you for joining us and being a part of the pre-PA sessions. It was a fun blast for Omar and I to answer everyone's questions, and just kind of hopefully at the end of these last 5 things, you've taken, or a stronger applicant, and have taken something home that it will hopefully help you and make you a more confident student, confident provider, and increase your odds of getting into PA school. So yeah.
I just want to thank also Sonia, Josh, Laura, Renee for coming on a Sunday night. And also I want to thank Mario and Omar for doing these for the last few months. You guys are rock stars. I met you guys virtually, and you guys really took this on and ran with it, and spent a lot of time making your presentations ready. And like I said, yes, and the presentations and the PowerPoints are all on our website. And I'm sure if you were able to register for this, you could find our website. But thank you guys again, and we hope to have you guys come every week, twice on Sundays, every day. And next year in 2024, our goal is to have Omar and Mario do these every days and twice on Sundays. Just kidding. I think Mario's wife will
that
come
was in the
in.
fine print? I didn't
Yeah,
see that.
I think Mario's wife will come to my house and murder me, but that's a whole different subject. And thank you guys again, everyone, for coming, certainly on a Sunday. And thank you for being inspirational, and great meeting all the new folks that came on today as well. So thank you.
And then one thing I noticed before we log off, I noticed for us, the panelists, we were just sending in our contact information, but I believe it's only visible to us, the hosts and
yeah,
panelists.
you just have to press everyone, and then it will go through.
Okay, all right. So Josh, Flora,
I could repost it for you.
Yeah. All right, and I will do that too before we log off.
And drop your thing to your YouTube page.
Oh yeah, I'll drop the link. But it's also just for the students. It's the same as my social media stuff, the Mexican PA on YouTube.
Yeah, and yeah, so you should be able to do it. I reposted it as well, but I will. But yeah, you just have to do the drop down to everyone.
Got it.
All right, I'll keep this open for a minute so everybody could download it. I mean, you could either copy it, you could download it, you can just press that little 3 dots and then download the whole webinar chat. But I appreciate you guys, and we'll let everyone go. And y'all stay out of trouble.
All right, bye guys.
Thanks, guys.
Much love.
It was a pleasure.
Bye. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Flora. Bye. Thank you, Josh. Bye.